The wind carried a quiet chill through the narrow streets of the old town as evening lights began to flicker one by one. Cars rolled past the Veterans Memorial Hall, their headlights sweeping across the faded marble sign that read, "Honoring Those Who Served." Inside, warmth and laughter filled the grand hall. The sound of clinking glasses, cheerful conversations, and music echoed beneath the chandeliers. The annual Veterans fundraiser was in full swing, a night where uniforms shone, medals sparkled, and proud stories were told with smiles. Young officers gathered in groups, sharing tales of modern missions and new technology. They wore clean blue uniforms and carried themselves with pride, unaware that tonight something unforgettable was about to happen. Outside the hall, an old man stood quietly near the steps. His coat was worn, his shoes carried dust, and his eyes held the kind of silence only soldiers understand. He had no medal on his chest, no badge to prove who he was, only a small folded paper in his pocket and a medal he never showed anyone. His name was Samuel Harris, a veteran who had once led men into battles that most of these young officers had only read about in history books. But time had not been kind. His friends were gone, his memories faded, and the world had moved on. Yet tonight, something pulled him here. Maybe a promise made long ago, or a memory that refused to die. He looked up at the brightly lit hall, took a deep breath, and pushed open the doors. Inside, the crowd barely noticed him at first. The air smelled of perfume, champagne, and polished brass. Tables were covered with silverware and golden plates. A band played soft jazz at the corner, and laughter rolled like waves through the room. Samuel walked slowly, his steps quiet, his hands clasped behind his back. He was searching for something, or maybe someone. But everywhere he looked, faces were unfamiliar. A young officer in a neat uniform noticed him and frowned. "Excuse me, sir, are you lost?" he asked politely, but with a hint of annoyance. Samuel shook his head. "No, son, I'm right where I'm supposed to be." The officer raised an eyebrow but said nothing. As Samuel moved deeper into the hall, a few others began to notice him too, some whispering, some smirking. His old coat and rough shoes stood out among the polished leather and crisp uniforms. One man whispered to another, "Who let that old guy in here? He looks like he came from the street." Another chuckled. "Maybe he's someone's grandpa who wandered in." Samuel ignored them. He had learned long ago that silence was more powerful than any reply. He reached a wall filled with framed photos of past heroes, black and white portraits of soldiers, commanders, and admirals from decades ago. He stared at one particular photo, his eyes softening. It showed a group of young men in muddy uniforms standing around a tank. And there on the far right was a younger version of himself, smiling, alive, unbroken. His hand trembled slightly as he touched the glass. "We made it, didn't we, boys?" he whispered to himself. Behind him, laughter erupted again. A group of officers had gathered near the drink table, glancing at him. One of them, tall, confident, with shining medals on his chest, said loudly, "Hey, old-timer! This event's for veterans, not history lessons." The others laughed. Samuel turned slowly, his calm gaze meeting theirs. "I was invited," he said quietly. The officer smirked, walking closer. "By who, the janitor?" More laughter followed. People nearby began to look, some amused, some uncomfortable. "I think you should leave before someone calls security," the officer said. "We're in the middle of an important fundraiser, not story hour." Samuel gave a faint smile. "I fought so you could have these fundraisers," he said softly. The laughter stopped for a moment. Then someone muttered, "What's he talking about?" The officer shook his head. "All right, that's enough. Sir, I'm asking you politely. Please step outside." Samuel sighed, looked around once more at the bright hall, and said, "You don't even know what this place cost." The officer frowned. "What did you say?" "I said," Samuel repeated, his voice low but steady, "you don't know what this place cost. The lights, the medals, the music, all of it. You don't see the ghosts standing behind you, do you?" The room fell silent for a moment. The band stopped playing. Then, before anyone could react, the officer took Samuel by the arm and began guiding him toward the door. "All right, old man, that's enough stories for tonight. Some people looked away, uncomfortable, while others snickered quietly. Samuel didn't resist. He walked slowly, letting the officer lead him. But as they reached the door, something unexpected happened. A sharp, commanding voice echoed from behind. "Lieutenant!" "Stand down." The officer froze mid-step. The crowd turned. At the entrance stood a man in a dark navy uniform covered with medals, an admiral. His presence filled the room instantly. The younger officers straightened up instinctively, their faces turning serious. The admiral's cold eyes scanned the room, then locked onto the old man. For a moment, the hall was completely still. Then the admiral took a deep breath, stepped forward, and did something that no one in the room expected. He raised his hand, stood at attention, and saluted the old man. Gasps spread through the crowd. The lieutenant's grip on Samuel's arm loosened immediately. "Sir?" he stammered. The admiral didn't answer. His salute remained firm. Samuel looked at him quietly, then nodded once, returning the salute with slow, trembling fingers. The silence in the hall was heavy. Even the clinking of glasses stopped. The admiral lowered his hand finally and said, "At ease, Sergeant Major Harris. It's been too long." A wave of whispers rolled through the room. "Sergeant Major?" someone murmured. "Wait, that's him?" The lieutenant stepped back, his face pale. "Sir, I didn't know—" The admiral turned sharply. "No, you didn't. But you should have known better than to treat a veteran like this." He looked at Samuel again, his voice softening. "Welcome home, old friend." Samuel smiled faintly, his eyes glistening. "Didn't think anyone would remember. How could we forget?" The admiral said quietly, "You're the reason some of us are still alive. The room remained silent. The young officers looked at each other, shame washing over their faces. The laughter, the arrogance, it all vanished. Samuel looked around slowly. The hall that had once felt cold and distant now seemed smaller, humbler. "You've done well," he said softly. "But never forget the men who built the ground you stand on." The admiral nodded. "We won't." For a moment it felt like time had stopped. 2 generations of soldiers, one saluting the past, the other learning its weight. Then Samuel took a slow breath and said, "Mind if I stay for a while?" "You're the guest of honor," the admiral replied firmly. "Stay as long as you wish." The crowd parted as Samuel walked back into the hall, the same hall that had moments ago turned its back on him. The young officers stepped aside respectfully now, their eyes lowered. Samuel didn't say another word. He simply walked to the wall of heroes, touched the photo once more, and whispered something no one could hear. Outside, the wind had stopped. The night was quiet again, but inside that hall, everyone knew they had just witnessed something rare, a living reminder of what true honor meant. As the night went on, the once loud fundraiser had turned into something quieter, more thoughtful. Conversations slowed, and every few minutes, eyes turned toward the old man sitting near the corner table. Samuel Harris sat with a cup of black coffee in his hand, steam rising slowly. The admiral, whose name was Admiral Reeves, sat beside him. They spoke in low voices, the kind of talk that only old soldiers understood. Around them, the younger officers pretended to be busy, but their ears strained to catch every word. Reeves leaned forward slightly and said, "I thought you were gone, Sam. Nobody heard from you after 91. Samuel smiled faintly, staring at the ripples in his coffee. "Guess I was. Life took me somewhere else. Couldn't stay near the noise anymore." Reeves nodded slowly, the weight of memory in his eyes. "After the Battle of Corin Ridge, everyone thought you didn't make it. The report said your unit was wiped out." Samuel gave a short chuckle. "Wiped out? Maybe on paper. Some of us crawled out of that mess, barely breathing but alive. We lost so many good men that day, Jack. Too many." Reeves's eyes darkened. "That battle changed everything for us. You were a legend after that. The way you held that line, even the enemy respected you." Samuel looked up finally. "Legends fade, Jack. People remember medals, not faces. When the war ended, I didn't want to be anyone's story. I just wanted to disappear." Reeves sighed. "And yet here you are. You came back tonight. Why?" Samuel's eyes drifted toward the stage where a large flag hung proudly. "Because this used to mean something," he said softly. This hall, this night, it wasn't always about money and suits. It was about the ones who never came home. The Admiral followed his gaze and said quietly, "Times have changed, Sam." "Maybe too much," Samuel replied. "Look at them, proud, young, full of talk. But they don't know what real loss smells like. They think respect is given by rank. It's not. It's earned by blood." His voice carried a calm authority that made even nearby officers pause. Reeves said nothing for a moment, just watching the man who had once saved his life. Then he asked softly, "What happened after the war, Sam?" "Where'd you go?" Samuel took a deep breath, his eyes distant. "I went home, or what was left of it. My wife was gone. Cancer took her while I was still out there. My boy Daniel couldn't forgive me for missing the funeral. He joined the army too, said he wanted to finish what I started. He never came back." The words hit hard. Reeves's jaw tightened. "I didn't know. I'm sorry." Samuel gave a small nod. "Not your fault. War takes more than it gives. I spent years trying to forget Jack, but some things never leave you." The Admiral's hand tightened into a fist. "You should have been honored. The government owed you more than a medal." Samuel smiled sadly. "They gave me a medal once. It's in a box somewhere, but honor isn't given by paper, Jack. It's in how you live after the noise ends." The Admiral leaned back, silent for a moment, and said, "You know, the young officers here, they have no idea who you are. Maybe it's time they learn." Samuel shook his head. "No, let them find their own battles. Mine are already over." But fate wasn't done with him yet. The lieutenant from earlier, still ashamed, approached slowly. His name tag read Cole. He stopped a few feet away, standing stiffly. "Sir," he said quietly, "I just wanted to apologize. I had no idea who you were." Samuel looked at him, his expression calm. "You don't need to apologize, son. You didn't know, but now you do, so learn from it. Never judge a man by what he wears. Judge him by what he's carried." Cole swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, sir." "Good," Samuel said softly. "And remember, someday you'll be the old one in the room. See how you treat those who come after." Cole nodded again and turned away, his face thoughtful. Reeves smiled faintly. "Still teaching lessons, aren't you?" Samuel chuckled. Old habits die hard. For a while they sat in silence, listening to the sound of the band quietly tuning up again. The tension in the room had melted, replaced by a quiet respect that no speech could have achieved. Then an announcement came from the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host said nervously, "before we continue tonight's program, Admiral Reeves has requested to say a few words." All eyes turned toward the Admiral. Reeves stood, straightened his uniform, and walked to the podium. The room fell completely silent. "Before I speak," he began, his voice steady, "I want to acknowledge someone in this room. A man who represents everything this fundraiser stands for. A man who was here before most of us were even born." Murmurs spread through the hall as Samuel's name was whispered. "Years ago," Reeves continued, "in a battle that many have forgotten, this man led a small group of soldiers against impossible odds. They held their ground until the last minute, saving hundreds of lives. Many didn't survive that day, but because of his leadership, I did. And so did many others." His voice wavered slightly. "Tonight we stand in a hall built to honor heroes, but somehow the real ones get forgotten. It's time we remember." He turned to Samuel. "Sergeant Major Harris, would you please stand?" The old man hesitated, then slowly rose to his feet. Every eye in the hall followed him. Reeves said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and join me." And just like that, every officer, every soldier, every guest rose. The room filled with the sound of chairs sliding back, shoes clicking together. Then, in perfect unison, the entire hall saluted. Samuel stood still, his eyes wide. His trembling hand rose to his forehead, returning the salute. For a moment, the years seemed to melt away. The young soldier he once was stood tall again, his heart steady, his spirit unbroken. The applause came next, loud and endless. Some clapped, some wiped tears from their eyes, and some simply stood in silence, realizing the depth of what they had just witnessed. Reeves stepped down and placed a small medal on the table in front of Samuel. "For the battles you fought, the men you led, and the honor you carried," he said softly. This one's for you." Samuel looked at the medal, then at Reeves. "I don't need another medal, Jack. Just make sure they remember the ones who didn't come back." Reeves nodded solemnly. "We will, Sam, I promise." The night moved on, but the atmosphere had changed completely. The fundraiser no longer felt like a show. It felt like a moment of truth. Officers came up one by one, shaking Samuel's hand, thanking him quietly. Even Cole, the young lieutenant, stood beside him like a guard, making sure no one disrespected the man again. The music played softly in the background, a slow instrumental tune that carried both sadness and pride. Samuel sat back down, watching the faces of the new generation, faces full of ambition, courage, and hope. And for the first time in many years, he felt peace settling in his chest. The ghosts of the past seemed to fade into the corners of the hall, no longer haunting him but standing beside him like old friends. Old friends. He whispered under his breath, "We did it, boys. They remember." The Admiral raised his glass in a quiet toast, and for the first time that night, the hall truly felt like a place of honor again. As the night slowly came to an end, most of the guests had already left, but the warmth of the moment still lingered inside the hall, like a gentle echo that refused to fade. The chairs were half empty, the lights dimmed to a soft golden hue, and the music had become a low hum that mixed with the quiet murmur of the last few conversations. Samuel Harris still sat near the corner table, the medal lying untouched beside his coffee cup. Admiral Reeves stood by the entrance, speaking quietly with the event organizers, his eyes glancing toward his old friend now and then, as if making sure the old veteran was not left alone again. The young Lieutenant Cole approached carefully, holding an envelope in his hand. "Sir," he said softly, "I found this in the archives. It's addressed to you." Samuel looked up, his brow furrowing. "To me? From who?" Cole handed it over. "I don't know, sir. It was dated more than 30 years ago." Samuel took the envelope gently, the paper yellowed and fragile. His hands trembled as he tore it open. Inside was a letter written in neat handwriting. His breath caught the moment he saw the signature at the bottom, Daniel Harris, his son. The letter was short but heavy with emotion. "Dad, I don't know if this will ever reach you. They say we're going into a dangerous zone tomorrow. I used to hate you for leaving us, for always choosing the army over home. But now I understand. I see the men around me, scared but standing tall, and I realize what you carried all those years. If I don't make it back, I just want you to know I'm proud to be your son." Samuel's eyes blurred as he read the last line. He folded the letter slowly, his hands shaking. The room seemed to fade away, the lights, the voices, even the music. He could almost hear Daniel's voice again, that same young tone from long ago. Reeves walked over quietly, sensing something had changed. "Sam, what is it?" Samuel handed him the letter silently. The Admiral read it, his expression tightening, his jaw clenching as he looked back at the old man. "He was a good man," Reeves said softly. "He was," Samuel replied. "And now I finally know. He forgave me." The Admiral placed a hand on his shoulder. "He would have wanted you to be here tonight. Maybe this was how it was meant to be?" Samuel nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "Maybe so." The clock struck midnight, and the last few lights flickered as the janitor began cleaning up. Reeves said, "Come on, old friend. Let me drive you home." But Samuel shook his head gently. "Not yet. I want to walk a bit. Haven't done that in a while." Reeves smiled sadly. "All right, but don't disappear again." Samuel grinned faintly. "Can't promise that." They laughed softly, the kind of laugh that carries more memory than sound. Samuel stood, put on his coat, and tucked the letter carefully inside his pocket. As he reached the exit, he turned back one last time. The hall looked peaceful now, the same hall that had once rejected him hours ago, now carrying his story like a sacred memory. The big banner still hung above the stage, honoring those who served. For the first time in years, those words felt true. Samuel stepped out into the cold night. The street was empty, and a thin layer of fog had begun to form, glowing under the streetlights. His footsteps echoed softly as he walked past the memorial garden. He stopped near a stone monument where the names of fallen soldiers were carved. His fingers traced the letters until he found one name: Private Daniel Harris. He smiled through the tears that filled his eyes. "You did good, son," he whispered. "You did real good." He took out the medal Reeves had given him, looked at it for a moment, then placed it gently on the base of the monument beside his son's name. "This belongs to you," he said softly. "Not me." For a long while he stood there in silence, the cold air biting against his skin, but he didn't feel it. His heart was warm. The pain, the loneliness, the years of silence, they finally felt lighter. The wind blew gently, carrying the distant sound of the ocean, as if whispering back to him. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. A faint smile crossed his face. Behind him, headlights approached. Admiral Reeves's car. Reeves got out and called out, "Sam! You all right?" Samuel turned slightly, nodding. "Yeah, just saying goodbye." Reeves walked over, standing beside him, looking at the same monument. "You never really say goodbye, you know," the Admiral said quietly. "Not to men like them." Samuel chuckled softly. "Guess you're right." They stood side by side in silence for a long time. Then Reeves said, "You know, Sam, we're starting a new memorial section next month, one for unsung heroes. I want your name on it." Samuel looked at him with surprise. "Mine? You don't need to do that." "I do," Reeves replied firmly. "They need to remember who you were, who you still are." Samuel thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Only if Daniel's name goes above mine." Reeves smiled. "Deal." The two old soldiers shook hands under the cold light of the street lamp. Their shadows stretched long across the pavement, merging like brothers in arms once more. Samuel looked toward the horizon where the first faint light of dawn was beginning to break. "You hear that?" he asked. Reeves frowned. "Hear what?" Samuel smiled faintly. "The morning. It's coming again." Reeves didn't understand at first, but when he saw the look in Samuel's eyes, that distant, peaceful glow, he knew. It was the look of a man finally free from his burdens. Samuel turned to walk down the street. Each step slower than the last, but steady, proud, unbroken. Reeves watched him go, standing silently as the old veteran disappeared into the mist. The wind carried the echo of his footsteps until there was nothing left but the sound of flags fluttering softly behind them. When Reeves turned back to the monument, he noticed something glimmering under the faint light. The small metal, now shining brighter than ever, as if touched by dawn itself. He smiled and whispered, "Rest easy, Sergeant Major. You've done your duty." The camera of the imagination pulls back. The hall, the street, the city slowly fading into the distance. The morning sun rises, spilling light over the memorial stones, and the world moves on. But somewhere, in that quiet corner of history, the story of one forgotten soldier still lives on. A story not written in books or sung in songs, but carried in the hearts of those who finally understood what true valor means. And as the last line fades, the screen of memory holds one simple image: the old veteran walking into the morning light, leaving behind a world that had finally remembered his name.